Hello everyone, this is LW Gaming and welcome to the video guide of all about faction buffs. So yep, from the last video I did mention about some other updates regarding the Bright Summoner and Shion's inclusion, as well as Enya's. Previously, I did not show all their faction buffs because currently I thought they only had their 3Cs, but turns out I was wrong. They have their 2Cs as well. So in this video, I'm going to be showing all that. And then once this video is up, the previous video that I mentioned about those will be removed from the Of course, it'll be delisted, but it will still remain in the remain remain up for those who have watched it previously. But to those new who are new and wanted to find out about the new factions to see, to say the least, this one will be the public video. So, anyways, moving before we start with this installment, there's something I need to point out, which is something that we need to talk about. So there are some faction buffs will work as single target, some will work as an AOE, and some of these can be both. So keep that in mind. So like for example, with a single target, you can tell by saying by when description says when entering battle, that's indicating that's for single target. But it says when entering battle, if it does not say when entering battle, it's going to be any damage type unless it states specifically. So let's move on to the first faction, which is Protagonist. So we got Matthew as the one that many people will have, like everyone should have him. His faction buff is from his 2C. And also, by the way, in this new version of this installment, I have included what kind of skill is part of the faction buff. So, for instance, most of them have 2Cs, so they're labeled with 2Cs. Some comes from their 3C, which will be labeled as 3C like as a passive or as a direct buff. So you get the idea. So Matthews is a 2C skill. When entering battle, damage dealt plus 15% when near an ally within 2 blocks. And there's Emperor Lovina, which is the other one. And Matthew and Emperor Lovina and Xion, all three of those are single target oriented. So, anyways, Emperor Lovina's the 2C skill is a faction buff. When entering battle, damage dealt plus 12%. If near allied Emperor Lovina within 3 blocks, damage dealt plus 17% instead. So as long as you're standing close to this guy, like Emperor Lovina himself, you hit a bit harder with this. So that's something you want to do most of the time. And finally, we have Xion, which is the newest like global unit that we'll be getting soon. This one has two versions of faction buffs. So the first one comes to his signature 2C, so beginner friendly. When using a single target skill, damage dealt plus 12%. If the enemy isn't killed while using a skill cooldown minus 1 turn. So essentially, I think if this one sticks well with the global version, I'll keep it as is. But if it is not the same, I'll fix it in the other video. And he also has a 3C, which is his passive. So this one only activates after his first action and after actively using the 3C. So this one, basically when entering battle, damage dealt plus 15%. When using its skill, if the enemy is not killed by this, skill cooldown minus 1 turn. So essentially, Xion is more focused on the single targets, but also if you're not able to kill anyone with this, then it's pretty much it's pretty much like I would say like either this benefits you or two, you could be dead. Next up, we got Legion of Glory. This is the other faction which I think is most popular back in the day, of the early days of Languisser. Anyways, Elwyn is one of those faction buffers. He has two versions of faction buff. His initial one is his 2C. When attacking in battle, damage dealt plus 15% when using HP. When HP is above 80%. So yeah, as long as you're healthy, you'll hit really hard. And then for 3C, the passive part is that when attacking in battle, damage dealt plus 15%, and you increase your damage dealt per ally death, and this can be increased up to 12%. So that means the total of So like 12 plus 15, that's like 27%. So you could hit pretty hard as long as you have a lot of allies dying. So the minimum of the amount you can have your allies die is of course four of them. And also if you have summons, they count as an ally. So yeah, you don't need to sack your own heroes just to get to that point, but you get the idea. So for Elwyn's faction, how it works, bring summons like Bright Summoner, for example. She's gonna go well with that, but however, don't think that's gonna be ideal because Bright Summoner does a better faction buff, which we'll talk about later. And next up we got Ledden. Ledden's a 2C skill. This is not a target based, so this is more like a defensive based. So this one increases counter damage by 20%. So not really much there. All it is just increase your counter damage, nothing else. I would say this is okay for you to be a defender, but if you want to be on the offense, this does not help you, honestly. And then next up we got Grenier, which I'm not gonna talk about much because although Grenier he has SP, he is good, but however his faction buff really not good because this does not offer you any buffs whatsoever, like any effects at all. All it is just a flat faction buff, nothing else. So if you have Grenier as your sole faction buffer, then yeah, consider getting someone else that does the job better. So yeah, the next one is gonna be Bright Summer, which I think you should probably get this by now. But if you missed her the first time, then I'm sorry because she won't appear as an off banner because she's an LR character. In fact, the first LR character to be a faction buffer. Anyways, she comes with two versions of her faction buff, one from her 2C and another one from her 3C. The 2C version of this is that when entering battle, damage dealt plus 8%. With 5 or more buffs, the damage will be increased by additional 4%. So as long as you're within like if you stack yourself with like more buffs, like 5 buffs or more, you'll be able to hit a bit harder with this. So you'll get a maximum of 12% increase, which is okay, but not the best. I mean that's only for beginners, by the way. If this is the only option for you to faction buff with Bright Summoner, but if you're at max level at like level 70, for example, you will have access to her 3C, which is by far the best one compared to the other one she has. And anyways, the 3C part of this is that when entering battle, so this activates whenever she uses the hymn of light, which is the 3C skill itself, as well as summoning unicorns. So yeah, when entering battle, damage dealt plus 15%. After battle, heals an ally with the lowest HP, equal to 2 times of Bright Summoner's int. And you could say that this healing is gonna go crazy all of a sudden. And there's also some cases where it will be using the unicorn's int instead. Overall, I would say this faction buff is really really strong. Like basically, it turned all your glory units into a healer, somewhat a healer, using Bright Summoner's int. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Origins of Light. So, anyways, we have D Heart as one of the 3 faction buffers. So D Heart is single target oriented. When attacking in battle, damage dealt plus 15% when units have 5 or more buffs. So his is pretty somewhat like hard to do because you need to have 5 buffs in order for this to be fully effective. Otherwise, this will not work. But however, if you want to have a similar faction buff, I would say get jugglers instead because jugglers does provide the same buff, but this one is a bit lighter on the conditions. So as long as the enemy has a lower amount of HP than you, so yeah, if your enemies actually have lower HP, you can pretty much hit them hard with this. And finally, we have Freya. Freya has 2 faction buffs. The first one is her 2C, which doesn't provide you any effects, but her 3C is something that makes her game changing for Origins of Light. So when attacking in battle, damage dealt plus 12%. If the unit is not in mixed forces, damage dealt plus 17% instead. So this one will be by far the best one, as long as you have units that's like in mixed forces. So you'll hit really hard with this. Granted. So anyways, Freya, I would say the best one for the faction buffing. Like so we see, although despite Freya being an SR character, she has an SP class by the way, which will make her even better. So if you like Freya back then, you're probably gonna love her more in her SP because she is gonna be the queen of fixed damage, plus the tank, of course. Next up, we got Empire's Honor, and forgive of me of like squeezing all that together because this new revolution of the screen is like kind of had to make some changes with the layouts. So, anyways, we got four characters in the Empire's Honor that does faction buff. Bernhardt is one of them, and the first like the 2C skill that he has, both works in the single target and AOE. This increased the damage by 20%, and also this only works if you're attacking in class advantage. So if you have a class advantage against the enemy, you will dish out even more damage to them. And then he also has a 3C version which will work universally, but however, this only works in single target. So there's a bit of a trade off on this one. So depending on which one you use, I would say 3C all the way because 3C hits harder, doesn't require any class advantage, but you need to be using it as a single target. So yeah, you could think of this like bit of a hard hitting unit, but anyways, moving on, we have Leon. Leon's faction buff works in both ways, like single target and AOE. And the damage that will be increased by 5% per block move. Or yeah, I think it's 5% each time. So I think that's what it was. So anyways, the further you move, the harder you hit. So that's how Leon works. So and also he has his SP, which could be good in some scenarios, but in PvP it really depends because Leon has fell off of Apex nowadays because of Andy. Because Andy does better when it comes to like the cavalry class kind of role. So yeah, Andy does better than Leon, unfortunately. But although you could technically have them both together, but in the long run, you probably won't be doing that. Oh, actually, forget what I said. I did notice that Leon did play a lot back then, but I don't know about the high level plays though, because some people might ditch Leon already. But if you still liked him, don't ditch him because he is still good, but not the greatest. Next up, we got Lance. 2C skill. This does not provide you any special effects. So if you use Lance as your primary Empire's Honor buff, then yeah, I don't know what to say because you're not getting the best value out of this. And finally, we have Rosenseal. I believe this is the one and only healer that does like faction buffing. I might be wrong, but actually no, scratch that. I was wrong actually. Bright Summoner is the other character, but would you count her as a healer? I mean, she could heal, but I would say yes, yes, she is a healer plus an attacker. Okay, 2C skill damage still plus 12% when entering battle. Uh, yep, when entering battle, of course. When under attack by an enemy, dispels one buff from the attacker. So, yep, essentially Rosensteel is pretty interesting because you'll do more damage when entering a single target. But when the enemy attacks you with this buff on, you will remove one of their buffs, which is pretty nasty in some scenarios. So, for example, if they've been buffed, there's a chance they will lose their special effects, which is yikes. Yikes for them, but good for you, I guess. Next up, we got Dark Reincarnation. This one still have two characters buffing here. So Bozo is one of them. Like he's the original character that does like faction buff for Dark Reincarnation before Licorice came along from the Tensei universe. So anyways, Bozo's a 2C, damage dealt plus 15% when attacking enemies with 3 or more debuffs. So yeah, Bozo he's the king of debuffs, so this will be no problem for him. But for other units that does not do debuffs, then yeah, you won't get much value of this. And this works on both. Oh god, whoops, my bad. I didn't mean to burp. This works in both single target and AOE. Same can be said with Licorice, but this one is only revolves around skills. The skill damage plus 3% per turn cooldown, up to 20% calculated by overall cooldown. So yeah, Licorice is a faction buff is calculated based on your cooldown on your skill. So depending on how high it is, I think the maximum you can get there is 5. So that makes a total of actually no, I was wrong. It's not 5. I would say like 7 or yeah, I would say 7 because like 3 times 7 is 21, which I mean 20 is just 1% shy. So Yeah, I would say 7 as the overall cooldown that you can get to get the maximum value. But in most scenarios, I don't think there are any other heroes out there that does that. Any dark reincarnation heroes that have that long cooldown, unless you have like an enemy that has like Gustav that can manipulate your cooldown, something like that. So yeah, this is gonna be interesting for Licorice. Like I don't know. Do you wish that this faction receives another faction buffer? Because most of the new heroes we have nowadays are buffing the existing factions already, and this one unfortunately was left out in the dark. Hopefully in the near future we might be seeing one with a new faction buff for this. But other than that, keep our let's hope that this will happen, but maybe not. But we'll see. Next up, we got Princess Alliance, and I'll say even though there's only 3 faction buffers here, I honestly don't think Princess Alliance needs another faction buffer because Christian is still being used to this day. So I don't see them going to create a new faction buffer for this. So, anyways, let's talk about Luna. Luna's faction buff works in both AOE and single target. After dealing damage to enemies, inflict fixed damage equal to 15% of enemy's current HP. And this is not meant to kill. So if you think this could kill people, think again because this is not meant to kill because the fixed damage is scaled based on the enemy's current HP. So for example, if the HP is really small, like really low to a point where they're about to die, that still won't kill them because they basically lose 15% of that. So I'll say Luna is alright, but in some scenarios, like especially in the brink of death for the enemies, that does not finish them. So yeah, you're gonna need someone else to do the job for that. Next up, we got Shelfaniel. Shelfaniel's faction buff is the 2C. This one increases skill damage by 12%. This one works as long as you're using a skill. This could be single target and AoE. And finally, we have Christiane. She does not come with a 2C skill, unfortunately, but she does come with a 3C, which will activate after like 3 turns. So that's like before her guard went down. When entering battle, damage dealt plus 3% per female units present on the battlefield, and this can be increased up to 18%. So this one by far is the best one when it comes to damage. So if you have Christian on your team and have her at level 70 and awaken, you could go to town with this. Christian is an excellent tank. Like before her rival Emilia used to be the best, but now Christian takes over the reign of that, which is nice to see. But although I personally like Amelia, but since her usage kind of fell off, it's a bit sad. But hopefully in the future, her savior is going to be SP. But right now, I don't think that's happening because the upcoming SP is not her. That's for sure. Because she does not have twin ponytails, which I think I already made a hint of like who exactly it was later. Because there's at least one character from Lancaster 3 that has ponytails, which you already know who it is. Which I'm not gonna spoil a bit much because I want this to like don't want this to be very very accurate because I don't want this to end up being wrong. By the way, next up we got Strategic Masters. I know that a lot of people like this faction, especially Cecil, because Cecil liked Strategic Masters because he think this faction is the best one out of all of it, which I honestly agree as well because they do come with some interesting buffs. So we got Ultimuller. Ultimuller's faction buff works in single target, and this one basically changes your unit's movement type to Terrain Master. And also when entering battle, damage dealt plus 50% when positioned on defense terrain. So as long as you're standing in a tree or whatever that gives you defense terrain, you will hit hard with this. Next up, we got Lamford. So his faction buff involves around mixed forces. So if you're able to meet with this condition, you will hit hard no matter what, as long as you're in mixed forces. So for example, how to describe it as mixed forces? So basically, your soldier's class type needs to be different from your hero type. So for example, your hero is a infantry, and you have your soldiers as a lancer. That's mixed forces. Next up, we got Grand Shield. This does not come with a 2C skill, unfortunately. But her 3C is what makes up for the no 2C. So basically, it's a passive skill which will activate whenever a strategic master kills an enemy, or after her first action. When battling units with a lower movement type, movement than self, damage dealt plus 15%. So this one involves around mobility. So if your opponent's mobility is lower than yours, you will hit really hard with this. This will work on both single target and AoE. Granted, Grin Shield is still good out there, but however, a lot of people dropped her because there are other units that does better jobs. But anyways, if you can use her well, go for it. If not, that's fine. Next up, we got Meteor Strike. Meteor Strike still has two faction buffers to this day, which is interesting. We still have Zerda as as one of the faction buffers for Meteor Strike, and as of recently with the new casting skill, Zerda has been a lot of impact in the Apex Arena front lines. So in case you guys haven't been heard about Zerda, her faction buff basically enables her to be really good. And to the point where Waifu Wars host the owner of that tournament had to ban her because she is crazy. So which you can all find out through like the other video mentioned about Zerda. Or of course you can join the Blank Wiki server to see what Zerda is about, because I gotta say her casting skill is pretty nuts. So her faction buff is her 2C skill, damage dealt plus 10%, and restores 20% HP if no allies within one block after taking action. You can move 2 blocks after an enemy is killed. So essentially, Zera's faction buff is like a healer based, but this only works if you have no allies within one block of her. And then, if that condition met as well after you kill the enemy, you can move 2 blocks away, which is pretty nice. This works in both single target and AoE. And then next up, we got Epsilon. And this one is a single target based, and is a 2C skill. When entering combat, or battle, I mean, crit and crit damage plus 12%, gains counter damage plus 25% after an enemy is killed. So yeah, apparently Epsilon is gonna be nuts with this faction buff. So yeah, even though Epsilon is another faction buffer, he's actually a madman. Like he hits pretty hard in some scenarios to this day. Okay, moving on, we have your Less Legends. This one has 3 faction buffers. The recent one is Enya, which will be added to the game on the 6th anniversary. So first we have Landius, 2C skill, damage dealt plus 15% if fighting with no class advantage. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And this one works in both single target and AoE. And next one we got Sigma, which will also work in single target and AoE, but this one is much niche than Landius, because this one increases damage dealt by 15% as long as your HP is not above like 80%. It's like below 80%. So yeah, if your HP is like somewhat like below full HP, like below 80% at least, you will hit hard. But in most cases, you do not want them to be like that. So yeah, Sigma is underwhelming, unfortunately. And next up, we got Enya. Enya is the new hero that will be coming out in the 6th anniversary. And the 1C and her faction buff is on her 1C passive. And when the unit acts again, dispels 2 random debuffs from self and becomes immune to debuffs received on the current turn. So I gotta say, Enya is has an interesting case. So because like in most of the new hits we have lately have the 3C version of the faction buff. For Enya, she decided, you know what, maybe 1C will probably be better, which will also mean that beginners could also take advantage of this as well. So yeah, Enya is probably the best one when she comes out, but anyways, we'll have to wait until that time comes because we don't have her in the game yet, in global at least. And next up, we got Heroes of Time. This one has 4 faction buffers. I don't think they'll need another one because Awakened one is still the best out there, and she hasn't fallen out of Apex now to this day because she is still good. So, anyways, let's talk about what each of their faction buff does. So, Angelica is one of the first ones to have faction buff, but sadly, she doesn't provide you any effects, so I'm not going to talk more about that. The second faction buffer is Joshua. This one is AoE oriented, so AoE damage plus 20%. So, he is AoE master, while Yusuke Urameshi is the single target master, which will increase the damage dealt on single target damage, like skill damage at least. Like, cannot be used as a basic attack, so it has to be a skill plus 15%. And then Awakened One, which known as the Awakener from CN, she does not have a 2C faction skill, but she does comes with a passive that will activate after her first action and after using the 3C. Damage dealt plus 8%. And the bonus will be increased by double against enemies with Spellbound. So the Spellbound debuff is actually AO's unique debuff, or mark whatever. So basically, when they get chained by this, they will like your units from the Heroes of Time will do more damage, which is nice. Next up, we got Mythical Realm, Gizarov. This one is not attack based. This is more like a support base. 2C skill. All skill cooldown minus 1 turn after killing an enemy. When an ally with this faction buff dies, all ally units all skill cooldown minus 1 turns. So yeah, this one involves around getting yourself killed, but the thing is, in most cases, you do not want to have your unit skill. Instead, you need your enemies to die. So I think the best part of this skill is that as long as you're killing an enemy, you will have your skill cooldown reduced. But if you have an ally dying, then you're also gonna get your skill cooldown reduced, but also lessen your chance of winning. Which in some cases you do not want them to die. Anyways, next up we got Sage of the Trees. This works in single target and AoE under certain conditions. So for single target, the damage needs to be ranged. And this will remove one debuff if you end your turn without dealing damage. So Sage is an interesting one. So he is a hybrid of both worlds. So he does a lot of damage on the range attacks as well as this also works in AoE. And if you end up not damaging anyone, you will have one of your debuffs removed. So that's pretty nice to have. And finally, we have Isolde, which is a recently added character, which she was introduced along with Jace. And she does not have a 2C skill, but she does have a 3C passive on her. So that when attacking, melee damage plus 15% and minus 30% reflect damage taken from the enemy. So this one requires her to be single target and it has to be melee damage. So yeah, she'll hit pretty hard with this, but also at the same time, you won't take much reflect damage because she is so strong. And last but not least, we got Lannister Reincarnation. This one features two faction buffers still, Ares and Hilda. So Ares works in both single target and AoE. Damage dealt plus 5% per enemy within 3 blocks from him. And this will be up to 20%. And this one will be like from any units actually, from yourself of course. So the more units you have on your within the range, you can imagine this is gonna be really insane. And finally, we have Hilda. Hilda's faction buff is straightforward. So this one buffs your single target skill damage, as well as your counter damage. So this one works in both ways. So this could work on the DPS unit as well as a tank, because tanking you can do counter damage, and also other DPS could also do counter damage as well. So yeah, this one's the best for both worlds. So if you want to choose which of the faction buffs, it's actually really up to you what team you're running on. So hopefully this guide will help you build your team based around factions, because faction buffs are really essential to the game, and this will change the tables for you if you use it right. Anyways, that's about it from me. See you all next time.